Defined by politics, allegations, blood and murder. Born in 1953 to one of Pakistan's leading political families, Bhutto attended Oxford and Harvard universities. Her father was a charismatic prime minister in the 1970s, but he was seized in a military coup and later executed. She herself was imprisoned at that time for 5 years, some of it in solitary confinement, before finding sanctuary in London. Benazir Bhutto at first resisted the political life, but returned to her homeland in 1986 to adoring crowds. In 1988, she became the Muslim world's first democratically elected female prime minister. She was just 35. Less than 2 years later, though, she was ousted, her rule opposed by Islamic traditionalists and much of the military. In 1993, she won election again, but accusations of poor governance and increasing corruption scandals, most notoriously involving the alleged transfer of money to Swiss bank accounts, saw her sacked again. And again, she went into exile. Her return in October 2007 to take part in a reported power-sharing deal with the strongman President Pervez Musharraf was emblematic of Bhutto's life. Weeping openly as she touched again Pakistan's soil, the woman who was the flag bearer for democracy and modernity in Pakistan began a slow procession through hundreds of thousands of supporters in her power base of Karachi. But there had been numerous threats against her life, and before the day was out, a suicide bomber blew himself up near her vehicle, killing well over 100 people. Benazir Bhutto escaped that time uninjured, but her enemies remained many, her days numbered. Hugh Remington, CNN, Hong Kong.
Official state television in Pakistan is now reporting that Benazir Bhutto has died as a result of the wounds suffered from these attacks on her political campaign. The former Minister for Information, Tariq Azim Khan, is joining us again on the phone with the latest information about this. Is there any more information about the nature of Benazir Bhutto's wounds, Mr. Minister?
Yes. Sadly, I have to confirm that the former Prime Minister Bhutto, she has died. I'm told by the concerned officials that she died because of pellet wounds to her neck and her head. Now, this could have been caused by the suicide bombers, that sometimes they can use pellets in the explosive device that they use. Could have been some other reason. Maybe it has been already been reported that the people had heard some firing, but it is too early to confirm.
Well, now, this is information from the hospital. After the last attack, there was a lot learned about who mounted that attack. Is there any sense yet in these early hours of who's responsible here?
I think it will be responsible to make any assessment right at this minute, but she was a target, as we already know, and there was extra security had been provided. And there have been threats against her life ever since she arrived in Pakistan, back in Pakistan, after 10 years of self-imposed exile abroad.
Who was it that would most object to her return?
See, this is difficult to say, but she had made some statements which had upset some Islamist elements, some Taliban supporters, because she had spoken very openly against the extremist forces at present working here in Pakistan, and she had been very open and very critical of their activities. So one can only assume that finger of suspicion can be pointed towards them.
Now, you had mentioned that since the initial attack on her return convoy, that Benazir Bhutto was able to stage several political rallies which were not disturbed by violence. We've just been looking at pictures of how security move her and attempt to move her very quickly on the ground to a waiting car. But just watching that is enough to give you chills because she's so close to the crowd. Was there any way to keep her safer?
Well, I think knowing what I know of her, she always wanted to be near the crowds, near her followers. But although she realized that she had this security threat, but it was difficult to keep her away from the people. And it was one of her greatest political assets. And although every security measure was taken, but of course there can never be 100% security in these kind of situations.
Indeed. Now, you mentioned that these bullets may have been actually part of the suicide bombing, the kind of projectile that bombers sometimes wear around the explosion in order to hurt more people. Is that what happened in the first blast?
That still is being investigated, but that in the first blast as well, it is still reported, and yet the investigations are not complete. But there were two blasts, and one of those blasts had used such things as nails and pallets in the first blast. So it is quite possible that the second one, because of the nature of the injuries that have been reported so far, and I must again say that these are only initial reports, and one has to be careful. But if these reports as are coming out, if indeed they are true, it seems that the suicide bomber had used these pellets along with the explosive device.
Let's talk a little bit about the difficulty of providing security for Benazir Bhutto. You mentioned earlier how hard it is. You'd like to let her campaign in a way that was her signature, close to the people. Was there any proposal to restrict any of her activities or movements in the name of her safety? I know that would be received poorly because it would seem to be, an attempt to limit her campaigning. But was there any discussion of that? The government at the time had, in fact, suggested to her that she should delay her arrival when she was still in Dubai, before she arrived on the 18th of October. She at that time had rejected this proposal and said that no, she will arrive as she had going to be planned to arrive on the 18th of October. And sadly, we saw what happened there. And since then, obviously, she was also quite aware of the threat to her life, but she always said that she did not care about the threat, and she will not be kept away from the people. Like I said, that was one of her major political assets, and she wanted to be close to the people, and therefore providing a security to such a target can be very difficult. Although I suppose the government did do their very best, and within the available resources, the security was provided. Are you aware of any response to these events from President Pervez Musharraf in these early moments, Mr. Minister?
No, I haven't heard any first-hand. I don't have any first-hand knowledge about that. But I understand that one of the sources has commented that because she had earlier met President Karzai, and Karzai himself is a target at the moment, and might have, in fact, caused this latest incident.
Now, what is your sense of what is going to happen going forward for the voters of Pakistan?
It is very difficult to predict exactly what is going to be the situation. We would have loved to have the elections on time. In fact, that has been one of the big features of Musharraf's regime, that all the elections were held on time as they became due. And these were being planned as laid out in the Constitution. The Constitution called for elections before 15th of January next year. So this 8th of January elections were strictly according to the Constitution. And everybody is hoping and still hoping. I cannot say what is going to be the reaction of the caretaker government because of this sad event that has taken place today.